Welcome to the Living Ageless and Bold podcast. Each episode, I bring you amazing women who inspire, educate, and share their experiences and journeys along the way. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's relax and have some fun hearing what can be accomplished after 55. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Living Ageless and Bold. If you know sports, you know my guest today. Christine Brennan has covered both the Summer and Winter Olympics since 1984. She's been with the USA Today since 1997. She was the first woman sports writer for the Miami Herald in 1981, first woman to cover the Redskins for the Washington Post in 1985. She's a regular contributor on CNN, ABC, PBS, NPR. She's written several books, and her most recent one, On Her Game, about basketball sensation Caitlin Clark, just hit number 2 on New York Times bestseller. So huge congratulations and welcome, Christine.
Well, Christina, great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to dive into the conversation. Again, thank you.
And my listeners, they know I am a huge sports fan, love sports, grew up, during the Redskins heyday here in DC, and loved reading about your story, because when you loved sports, but there weren't a lot of options for girls when you were growing up. So kind of talk about how this evolved to get you to where you are today.
Oh, I'm so fortunate and lucky to have I had my own personal Title IX, Christina. I had my dad and my mom. Back when I was growing up, girls were just not encouraged to love or play sports. And I'm tall, I'm 5'11" and a half. And my mom joked way back when that I was born size 6X and kept right on growing. And so I was tall and I loved playing sports. I was good at them, got my training wheels off on the bike before most of the boys in the neighborhood, even boys that were a little older. And so they wanted me around. They didn't want any other girls around, but the guys wanted me around. And I'm still friends, by the way, with most of those guys that I grew up with, where we stay in touch and I see them every now and then. And various places we are in the country, even in the world. One of them is in London. And, so great memories, great friendships that last to this minute. But yes, they wanted me to play. They'd invite me to play baseball. And again, there's no real organized sports until probably second or third grade, where the boys would go off to Little League. And then I would kind of throw the ball up in the air and catch it for a while until my mom and dad understood the situation and got me into tennis. And I played tennis all through, as childhood and then all through high school as one of my sports, and then many other high school sports as well. I was a 6 sport athlete in high school, and people say, "Oh my gosh, that you must have been so great." And I was like, I was good enough, but no.
Well, I was trying to figure out, what are the 6 sports?
So field hockey and tennis, first doubles tennis, and then field hockey in the fall, basketball, volleyball in the winter, and softball and track and field in the spring. But I did them not because I was so good, but no one cared about girls' sports back then. I mean, my parents did and other people did, but no one cared. I mean, I graduated from high school in 76. And so, it was just Title IX was signed by Richard Nixon in June of 1972 and basically ignored for about, 10, 15, 20 years. So it was all just whatever the school provided or what your parents fought for. And my mom and dad obviously wanted me to play and encouraged me every step of the way. But yeah, our field hockey team, which would go on to win 3 Ohio state titles, I went to Otway Hills High School in the suburbs of Toledo. After we left, obviously, we just had a few games and that was it. There was no state championship back then. There was nothing. But the field hockey team and the program did go on to be one of the best in Ohio, one of the best in the country. As I said, 3 Ohio high school championships into the 90s and this part of the century. And yet our coach or one of us would have to jump on the riding mower to mow the field as the other team was arriving, and also to put the white lines on the field, while the football stadium on a Tuesday, 72 hours before the high school football game kickoff, would sit pristine and ready to go. In other words, the incredible disparity. When people ask, why do we need Title IX? That's why we need Title IX. In other words, no one cared about girls' sports. Can you imagine a coach as the game is about to begin, on the riding mower, mowing the field to make sure that the ball doesn't get lost in the high grass. I mean, this was the kind of ridiculous travesty, kind of oddball humor of girls' sports back then. And I went to a high school where everyone wanted their daughter to go to college. Everyone wanted their daughter to have every opportunity to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, even play sports. And yet it was set short shrift that no one even thought that sports would be part of that conversation to the level of the boys. And if anyone doubts why we needed Title IX, the law that opened the floodgates for girls and women to play sports, well, you don't need to doubt anymore. But being tall, being encouraged. I also love to write, and we had season tickets for Michigan football because Ann Arbor's only 45 minutes from Toledo. Season tickets for University of Toledo Rockets football. We would do doubleheaders. Our dad played high school football and then had a scholarship at Drake, was a good high school football player and college football player way back in the day, and loved sports. So I'm the oldest of four. I have a younger brother, two younger sisters. So it wasn't older brothers. It was my dad and me and my mom and mom played just some, club things in Chicago schools, back in the 40s, nothing like real sports, for girls. And so anyway, that was we went to Detroit Tigers games. We went to Chicago White Sox games. We visited our grandparents and our cousins. Everything was about sports, playing and loving sports, watching sports. And then even in my diary, I'd keep track of the games. So I was, as it turned out, I was a budding little sports writer, but none of us knew it then. And I didn't even know that women or girls could do this. I had no role models. So I thought I'd be a political reporter, which shows you again, the value of, as Billie Jean King says, to see it, to be it, you need to see it to be it. And of course it worked out just fine, but that was the encouragement of my parents to love whatever it was. And it was, again, it turned out to be the adventure of a lifetime, the life of my dreams, even to this minute, all of that because my mom and dad said, yes, sure, honey, go ahead and love and play sports at a time when every other girl I knew was being told no. Most other girls, obviously my sisters were, but most other girls were told, no, you cannot go play with dolls, go play with your Barbies, go play dress up. You cannot play sports. And so how lucky was I that my parents said that? And obviously I was on my way.
Wow. And I'm curious, I interviewed your colleague, Hannah Storm, not that long ago, and her story is unbelievable. She sent out resume after resume after resume, and she actually got hired in North Carolina as a sports anchor as a joke. They're like, who's going to watch this? A woman's going to talk about sports. And guess what? Look at her now. So 1980s to I'm sure you were sending out resumes too. And I'm sure people were like, a woman sports writer? I don't think so. How difficult was that? Or maybe it wasn't difficult, but for you to end up at the Herald? Great point. And for sure, Hannah's career, we're basically the same age, a year or two apart. And certainly, amazing career that she has had. And we of course know each other. And, I was lucky. I went to Northwestern University undergrad and I got my master's, and I knew it was the best. I feel obviously I'm very biased. I'm on the board of trustees and I teach, do some mentoring and teaching there to this day at Northwestern. And, I think it's the best journalism school in the country. Again, I'm biased. There's many good ones out there. And so I basically, I was launched into this life of, that I'm just, dancing on earth, and so fortunate. So I was totally prepared journalistically, and that was more important. I knew sports, but I needed to learn about journalism. And so we never had a sports writing class ever. But we didn't need one because we needed to learn, journalism. And if you look at my reporting, even with this book, it's journalism. It's, I'm breaking news and I'm telling people these stories, and that's important to me. That's how I've covered sports my entire career. First day freshman year, I met a fellow young, journalism student, one of my classmates who also was interested in sports. I think everyone will know who it is. We are best friends to this day, like brother and sister, Michael Wilbon at ESPN. So Wilbon and I, first day freshman year in September of 76. Pretty cool. We go back a long way. He always says, don't say when it was. And I'm like, hey. I think wasn't he in the DC market before he went to ESPN?
Well, he is. Yes, he came. He was at the Washington Post and actually was instrumental in me coming to the Washington Post after my 3
Okay.
years. And he still is. He's in DC and also has
Okay.
a home in Arizona. But he's still here. And we sat next to each other at the Washington Post for 10 years. So after knowing each other so well in college, and also he actually showed me the neighborhood where he was renting and I was renting, and it's a neighborhood where I actually own my home now. So Will Bonham, a huge part of my life always. But yeah, I think being from Northwestern, so I had internships all the way through. Everything was about internships, professional experience. Going to a journalism school like Medill, gets you ready for that. And so I interned 2 summers at the Toledo Blade, my hometown paper, and then Lexington, Kentucky, as part of a Northwestern program, and as a newspaper there, the Herald Leader, and then also the Miami Herald between my undergrad and my graduate, finishing up my graduate time at Northwestern. And so I had 4 internships, and then the Miami Herald hired me. But hey kids, internships are key. Moms and dads, everyone who's watching us, to get those internships, which are harder to get now. Obviously, the bottom has fallen out of the newspaper business, and that is very sad for our democracy as well as for young rising talent. But good people and wonderful young students I mentor, they're going to make it. It's still going to be okay. And we need that more than ever in this country, coverage of events and news and sports and politics and everything. And so, but yes, I learned that. I knew that. So I had that internship. And then the Miami Herald had never had a woman sports writer before, as you alluded to. And they really were behind. This was 1981. And most big newspapers, the Herald was one of the top 10 papers in the country back then. Most of the others had women sports journalists for a good, maybe 5 to 10 years, women who came before me, like Leslie Visser and Robin Herman and Tracy Dodds, other great names, Lori Mifflin. And so the Herald was behind. So she was an intern a few months ago. She we love what she did, worked out great. Let's hire her. And then they put me on college football and also some pro football, which back then there was no baseball, no MLB, no NBA, no Miami Heat, no hockey. So it was just college football and pro football. So they at age 22, I was rising quite quickly at the Miami Herald. I was very fortunate, but that experience I had the previous summer showed them, I think, that I could do the job. And on my website, which is just myname.com, people can go there and check it out. I have a student tab, and I do have that advice about internships being everything. So all of that, I think, led to me getting that Miami Herald job. And I say this to people, and I'll say it to you. If I had been a white male, I would not have gotten that job. They really needed to hire a woman. And so for those out there who say, oh, it's tokenism, or it's not right or not fair, or, we just whatever. Well, no, they felt pressure or felt something in the world that they were behind. Well, that turned out to be great. So there's nothing wrong with quote unquote, again, I've never thought of myself as a token. I was totally ready for this, beyond prepared by Northwestern and my internships. But, they were kind of pressured into hiring a woman. That woman turned out to be me. Obviously, 44 years later, things have gone pretty darn well. But
you've proved yourself.
Well, you
too.
also want to give people a start, though, and give them a shot. And you want a newsroom and a sports department to look like the country. And obviously the Miami Herald had just a whole bunch of men who were dear friends and mentors and wonderful. I love them. I'm still in touch with some of them. But it was past time to have more diverse voices in the sports department. So anyway, there's that story, which is kind of a fun look at the situation.
Yeah. And then you were at the Post, and I grew up in the DC area. I graduated from high school in 85, college in 89. I mean, those were the glory years of the Redskins. How fun was that to cover?
It was amazing. Yeah. So I came and I covered the NFL in 84 when I first came to the Post. I was in Miami for 3.5 years. And then they put me on the beat in 85. And in fact, it was funny. Wilbon said, he goes, you know how big this is? And I said, yes, I do know, because I've already been in town, obviously. And he said, let's just put it this way. If Reagan and Gorbachev, which of course was the time period when they were meeting, and they'd come, Gorbachev would come to DC and shut down the whole area around the Washington Post, which was right by the Soviet embassy at the time. But if Reagan and Gorbachev, declared world peace, but Washington beat Dallas, the Washington Post would be like, Washington beats Dallas would be that. I mean, this is kind of a joke, obviously. And then below that would be, oh, by the way, world peace, Reagan, Gorbachev. So I knew how big a deal it was. And it was a wonderful experience. Joe Gibbs is, I think, the greatest football coach of all time. Now, I realize there's a lot of competition for that, but he won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks, not a one of whom will ever be a Hall of Famer. Vince Lombardi, Bill Walsh, Chuck Noll, all these people, had Hall of Famers, and Gibbs did not. And, Gibbs did not want a woman. So this was 1985, and the other 3 major leagues had all had equal access for female sports writers by that point: NBA, NHL, and Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball because of a major lawsuit. The NFL still was catch as catch can. So I'd go to one city when I was covering the league in 84, and I could get in the locker room to do my job. And then I'd go to another game, another city, another week, and I'd be in the loading dock, smelling the bus fumes by myself as all the male reporters went into the locker room. The locker room is a very strange workplace, but it is the workplace. And it's what the league and the players want. They don't want to come and chase after the journalists. They want the reporters to come in, do the interviews. Of course, keep in mind it's TV cameras. So the idea of sheltering a woman, right? Like, oh, she can't look. Well, there's TV cameras that are beaming things live. It's far worse for a family watching at home to see something in the locker room than a woman who's totally prepared for it and a professional in all ways. So in 85, once the Washington Post was putting me on the beat, George Solomon, the sports editor, my sports editor, good friend to this day, had a meeting with Pete Rozelle, then the commissioner of the National Football League. And the NFL, because it was just a patchwork and it was a mess, they knew they had to deal with it right then and there. They were behind the times. And so they then said that it would have to be equal access. If the locker room was open to male reporters, it had to be open to female reporters starting in August of 1985. That happened to be when the Post put me on the beat. We've never said for sure, but I think you can pretty much tell that you could not have the Washington Post reporter, in this case, me, standing outside when every other journalist from all the other newspapers, including tiny, smaller newspapers, would be able to go in and do their job. So then it was equal. Joe Gibbs said on a TV interview with the late great Glenn Brenner, she shouldn't be in the locker room. I wrote a letter. Gibbs said, Pete Rozelle said, nope, she's in the locker room. It's equal access. And Joe Gibbs said, fine, those are the rules. What more could you ask for? He personally disagreed with it, but he said, we will abide by those rules. And Christina, 3 years on the beat, 85, 86, and 87, not one problem, never stopped. Class act all the way. Gibbs was amazing. He didn't love everything I did because no one loves everything a journalist does, and no one loves everything a beat writer does. And in fact, if I'm doing my job properly and Gibbs is doing his job properly, we're not going to always get along because I'm not beholden to the team. I'm not beholden to him. I am doing my job with the truth and the facts as best as I can gather them on a daily basis for the readers of the Washington Post at that time, viewers, people listening, whatever, on the radio, whenever I would have those appearances on TV or radio. I am not there to be public relations for him, for the team, for Joe Theismann, for any of them. And they knew that. And even if they didn't always like that. And so it was amazing. And of course, they went to the Super Bowl in 87, the strike year, won the Super Bowl. So the last game I covered as the beat writer was Washington beating Denver. And then a couple of weeks later, I came back to DC, unloaded all my warm weather clothes from San Diego. Super Bowl was there, put all my sweaters and other stuff in ski gear, and went up to cover the Calgary Olympics, starting to cover the Olympics for the Washington Post.
Wow. Okay. So you had one of your books was Inside Edge, and that was all about Tonya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan. That was kind of happenstance, right? That you happened to be covering, and when all of this unfolded, and it just gave you a great opportunity, right?
Oh, it did. I mean, so much of life is luck and being in the right place at the right time, as my dad used to say, wind blowing the right direction. And so I when you cover the Olympics, as I then was doing for Miami Herald and then Washington Post for all those years, if it's the Summer Olympics, you're covering gymnastics, swimming, track and field, the big sports that your readers care about and that Americans do well in, diving with Greg Louganis, all of that. And for the Winter Olympics, it's really figure skating because of the incredible interest back then. The TV ratings were through the roof. And so, yes, I was in Detroit on January 6, 1994. And that was when the attack occurred, when this gang of, the gang that couldn't shoot straight was trying to, actually, they were thinking of killing Nancy Kerrigan, which, of course, is not funny at all. Thankfully, they ended up hitting her knee with a police baton. And the hitman, as Nancy Kerrigan has told me several times, thank goodness the hitman wasn't a very good hitman. He missed the kneecap and hit her on the side of the knee, a bruised knee, and that spurred Nancy Kerrigan on to the greatest performance of her life. And of course, we later found out Tonya Harding and her live-in ex-husband and all this other gang of goofballs all were involved in it.
I lived that. I remember watching live when all of that happened, and it was truly unbelievable. Like that. And then when you found out that it was, her teammate and so you must have been, nothing like that's ever happened. You guys must have been, the reporters must have been like, what are we experiencing?
Without a doubt. Well, in fact, I will never cover a story like that. I've said that. I felt it at the time, and I you've nailed it. Absolutely. And it still is the case. There's never been a story like that. And of course, consider, this went on for 6-7 weeks from that attack all the way to the end of February, and it built. And here's the statistic. We talk about Caitlin Clark and the TV ratings and how amazing she is, an entertainer, just as, the greatest thing that's ever happened to the WNBA in terms of eyeballs and interest, for a league that deserved it sooner and never got that attention. Well, that when Nancy and Tonya skated in the short program in Lillehammer, I was there in Norway covering all that, end of February of 1994. Obviously, there were many other skaters in that competition, but that short program, the women's short program, is the 6th highest rated show in television history, not sports, all of television. Last MASH is number 1. Who Shot JR? Dallas, number 2. Episode of Roots is number 3. 2 Super Bowls involving the 49ers and Joe Montana are 4 and 5. And then Tonya Nancy is 6, 48.5 rating. That means half the nation watched. It was tape delayed. Almost everyone knew the result. It was like 8 hours old when they were watching it, back in the United States. A 48.5, the Super Bowl is lucky to get a 40. That's how huge this was. And I covered every second of it. And it was absolutely insane. And of course, there's no social media. This was a story that did not need social media. It was just, but if there had been social media, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine how much, it really couldn't have gotten any bigger, but it was extraordinary. And I was in the thick of, it's when I started doing TV work and at that point, just doing TV for everybody. I'd do the Today Show and Good Morning America and Nightline and ABC News and CBS. It was amazing and so much fun to cover that. And at the end of the day, you could laugh and say it was fun because Nancy Kerrigan wasn't hurt seriously. And she went on to get the silver medal, should have had the gold. But figure skating judging being what it is. And so everyone, it was, a win-win as it turned out, even though, of course, Nancy Kerrigan was attacked, which is horrible. But it turned out to be something so weird, so strange. And then again, Nancy Kerrigan was fine and went on to that great performance at the Olympics.
Was anything else in your career? I want to get into the book, but just because you have had such a storied career, other than that, anything really stand out in your career that was I'm so grateful that I was able to experience that?
Certainly there have been others. Yeah. That 7 weeks was off the chart. And I appreciate it in the moment, even as I was getting pulled this way, that way, and the other way. It was great. I was so honored and so happy that I was covering all of it. The 1999 Women's World Cup soccer team, I jumped on that as quickly as I could when we started seeing the full stadiums, 80,000 people for a women's soccer game, bigger than the Jets playoff game in the Meadowlands 6 months earlier. New York Jets, bigger crowd. And so I did cover that, wrote about it, and wrote about the importance of that. That was 99. And, I do think there's a tie-in. So that was fun. And to be in the Rose Bowl with 80,000 people, or actually 90,000 people in the stands and 40 million more watching on TV. That was July 10th of 99. Not that I remember, but huge. And it's a part of my book, Best Seat in the House. And it's actually, I mentioned it in On Her Game as well, because you've got that moment that the nation has just shows how much it has fallen in love with what we've created because of Title IX. Women not in leotards, not in swimsuits, not in figure skating dresses with sequins, not that traditional looking Olympic athlete, wearing again, a leotard or a dress, a tennis dress, obviously. No, these were women in baggy shorts and baggy shirts and tall socks, soccer uniforms worn by men. And the nation just absolutely went crazy over it. And it is a trivia little thing for the next cocktail party for anybody. What is the only story in the history of stories made the cover of Time, Newsweek, People, and Sports Illustrated the same week? Time, Newsweek, People, and Sports Illustrated. Only one story ever. Not Mary Lou Retton, not Secretariat, because you got to get, crossover. You got to be in sports. Gerald Ford, for example, as a president, also was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. But the only one that has made all four of those covers in the same week is the 1999 women's soccer team, Brady Chastain whipping her shirt over her head.
I was just going to say, was that the one? Because that was so unheard of prior to that. And there was, the shock of the world. She took her shirt off. She's only in a bra, sports bra.
Which is exactly. And that, of course, she did that because she watched men's soccer for years overseas, just on cable or whatever she was watching as a girl growing up. And she watched that happen. And she said, well, this is how men celebrate. So I'm going to celebrate too. That's how she did it. Obviously, the sports bra, people thought, oh, she's trying to promote the sports bra. There's no way she could have known what order she'd be in the kicking, in the penalty kicks, to then know that Brianna Scurry would make the save that then would make her kick. I mean, no way. Right. And, but also when you consider it, she was wearing more than most women were wearing at the beach probably that day, that summer of 99. And how used to it, fascinating how our country has changed for the better on women's sports and women.
I was just thinking about that.
Women jogging and running and athletes. You don't even give it a second thought if you're driving by a whole group of, or one woman or a whole group of young women or girls, whatever, who are jogging in sports bras. And yet the nation was kind of shocked, right? Back then in 99, showing.
And we go to the grocery store today in a sports bra and, leggings. It's
right.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's, you just been to aerobics or you've been to your personal trainer, right. You've been working out. Now you're doing, and that's again, the amazing change in this country for women in sports. And why I say today's the greatest day to be a woman or girl in sports until tomorrow. And then the next day. And there's so many positives, even as we deal with obviously other issues, of course, especially the NCAA and what they're doing with paying athletes. They've got to start got to pay women. You just can't pay men. But that's we'll see how that plays out. But anyway, that certainly was a big deal. And also breaking a lot of news, including the Olympic, really, really troubling, but Olympic sex abuse scandals. When I have these young athletes who confide in me, sometimes it takes a year of trust to then be able to tell those stories and bring those sexual abusers, coaches or other skaters, male skaters, whatever, to justice, or in one case, a female coach who was just awful in her behavior towards skaters, abusive and not so much sexual abuse, but just awful mental and verbal abuse. And be able to, to write those stories and break that news as I've been able to do, to then have this U.S. Center for Safe Sport or whatever the sport is, either kick out those people or suspend them or bring them to justice in another way. So again, the trust that those young women place in me is just huge. And I take that over the last 10 years. I've done a lot on that. I wish we weren't able to write about those stories and talk about those stories because I wish they didn't exist, but they do, and they're real. And I trust and listen to young women. And if anyone is watching us or knows anyone in sports, I'm easy to find to talk because their voice needs to be heard. And justice, let me put it, journalism is, I do my job and then whoever takes it from there. I obviously don't know what's going to happen with investigations, but we find often that the journalism leads to People
Yes.
making sure that these young athletes are safe and that whoever is the alleged perpetrator is brought, is obviously suspended or removed from the situation involving that young athlete. So I've been working on that, and that's very meaningful to me as well.
I bet. And hopefully that's even prevented things from happening, seeing that, this could be exposed, that people aren't going to let this just happen, once we know about it. Yeah. The gymnastics was just horrible.
No, it is. It's terrible. And then Simone Biles, obviously her voice and the way she's fought, she's not only the greatest gymnast ever, the GOAT, right? Greatest of all time, but she's also the most famous, the best known, whatever the right wording is, survivor of the worst sex abuse scandal in Olympic history. And the worst, sex abuse scandal in sports history, the Larry Nassar horrors. And how amazing is that Simone Biles competing and so amazing in her life as an athlete, and then also testifying in front of Congress and fighting to make sure USA Gymnastics did the right thing and got new leadership, and with just a tweet or a post on social media, just could fight for those athletes again and again. So Simone Biles is remarkable because very few athletes have become the greatest of all time while also being a survivor themselves of sexual abuse, and then also being the voice for those who are voiceless, the hundreds of women who were abused, and how Simone Biles, among Allie Raceman and others, have stood up for those athletes and fought for them, including in the halls of Congress.
Yeah. Yeah, it truly is. Like I said, and hopefully that will prevent, or let, if it is happening, they can come forward. They realize that, somebody will listen to me. If it happened to Simone Biles, like you said, the GOAT, hopefully that would inspire others to come forward. And I'm glad you said that, because we never know who's watching, who's listening. So if anybody, you can find Christine. I can help you get to her if there is something you want to share.
Yeah.
And I knew our 30 minutes was going to go quickly, and I can't end this without talking about your new book, because Caitlin Clark has truly, I think, she's changed women's sports. She is just single-handedly exploded women's basketball. I'm a huge basketball fan. Virginia Tech made it to the Final Four, which was so exciting for a school like ours. And we went to so many games. It's such a great sport to watch. So tell us about the book. Tell us a little bit about Caitlin and where you see women's sports going.
Yeah, well, thank you. And On Her Game is really a labor of love, also kind of total serendipity. I wasn't really planning to write a book, even as we're speaking here. Even a year and a month ago, there was no book. So once we decided, had a conversation at Scribner, I was off and running on this project. And I spent, after the Olympic break, I was with the Indiana Fever, wherever they were, had some exclusive access to practices to watch Caitlin be silly and funny and jumping around like a little kid and
human.
Yeah.
She's a person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, she's great. I mean, if you're cheering for Caitlin Clark, she's even better in person. They often, people say, "Oh, I don't want to know," because they're not going to be as impressive, or you'll be disappointed. No, it's the complete opposite. I asked her 40 to 50 questions for the book, mostly in small press settings. Nothing was off limits. Everything was fair game. And she is 22 going on 40 or 50. The way she handles it, the maturity. Tiger Woods would mope and not want to talk and leave. Caitlin sits there, looks you in the eye, goes on and on with an answer, often says thank you as she's leaving the press conference. I mean, remarkable person, the maturity, the humor. She's funnier than people think she is. All of that, as I said, I could ask her anything. It's an unauthorized biography, unauthorized book. That sounds ominous. It's not. It's what you want. Caitlin will write her own book, whether she writes it with someone or on her own, and that will be great. And I'll buy it. Well, I'll buy it. That's not this. This is no holds barred. This is journalistic. This is where I can talk about the disastrous decision to keep her off the Olympic team. A full chapter with all new reporting called Olympic Snub. I've got my breaking. I broke that news back when it happened that she wasn't on the list, which was horrible. Terrible decision by USA Basketball. I go in depth into all of that and the mistakes and the contradictions and just a terrible decision. Awful. Looks worse today than it was a year ago. I broke the news of the charter flights, that they were so haphazard, the NBA and WNBA not prepared for Caitlin's security and at risk, as Caitlin Clark is one of the most famous athletes in the country. She's one of the most famous people in the country. And how can you have her walking through baggage claim in the concourse? They'd never do that for a male athlete, but then they did it for, obviously, Caitlin for a little bit until my reporting and questions. And then, so that's in the book. The WNBA's utter lack of preparation for this moment, all in the book, all my journalistic work and just what I've done for all my years covering sports in Miami, Washington Post, USA Today, on TV, as you mentioned. All of that is brought to bear in a book that I wrote for 12-year-old boys and girls, for their moms and dads, their grandparents. It's an adult book, but it is absolutely great for kids. I made sure of that. It's inspiring. You've got logo threes jumping off the page. You've got Caitlin's mindset, what she thinks, how she thinks about fans, her duty, she believes, to play, and fans are there to cheer for her, all the autographs, why she does it, how important kids are to her. Everything is in on her game. It covers it all, but it also moves quickly, partially because I wrote it in 4 or 5 months. In other words, I will take you into the history of the WNBA, 74% Black league. We understand how those issues in our polarized society can rise up. There can be jealousy. Muffet McGraw talks about petty jealousy that she's seen from her players at Notre Dame when she was there now in the WNBA, how they're all dealing with it. Not necessarily they're jealous, but just Muffet looking at, the stage voice. Caitlin Clark's friends. I've got wonderful voices, Black and white, talking about the race issues. And then I move on to the season. Iowa, reliving all the Iowa magic, those beautiful shots, what she was thinking at the time. So I think people will find it a lovely joyride through her life, with also very important issues that I touch on and talk to people about that I never thought I'd see this in women's sports in my career, that this moment would occur where people would be lined up for hours outside, especially Big Ten arenas, in the cold in January and February, like it's a Springsteen concert or Taylor Swift or Beyonce. And they're lined up, for hours to get in to watch a woman play basketball. That is a sentence, Christina, I never
goosebumps.
Thought I could say. And that, of course, is the reason I wrote the book and what's in on her game.
Yeah. And obviously, number 2, New York Times bestseller. Congratulations. That's an incredible accomplishment. I think we're all fascinated by her, by the, it was just all of a sudden, who is this woman? And then we were just all so enamored with her. And she does give off that aura of, she just seems like just a nice person, who's just a really hard worker and a phenomenal athlete and very competitive, but she's real. She seems real.
Absolutely. So. She is that. And when she's chucking it from the parking lot, she's shooting from the next county and it goes in, that earnestness combined with effortlessness, but her kindness. Yeah. Absolutely. She was raised, she was raised right. I mean, she is just so appreciative. I don't know that I've ever met an athlete or public person more appreciative of what they've been given and how important it is for them to give back than young, obviously now only 23-year-old Caitlin Clark.
Wow. Well, Christine, thank you so much for joining me today. I know you are a very busy woman, and I'm really excited to share you with my audience. And ChristineBrennan.com, that's your website?
That is it, ChristineBrennan.com. And I get those emails within a few minutes usually, although email me back again after this book tour we're adding more stops. And so please try me again after a couple of weeks. In fact, do that with most people. Especially if you're a younger person, it's okay to email back because sometimes, you don't get to something right away. There's a little tip for everybody. But yes, feel free to get in touch, especially anyone who's interested in journalism or writing, moms and dads, young boys, girls, everyone, happy to help any way I can.
Oh, so kind of you. Thank you. Thank you again for joining me.
My pleasure, Christina. Thank you.
Thank you for listening or for watching this episode of Living Ageless and Bold. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit subscribe. And if you like the episode, I hope that you will give us a great review. You can also head over to livingagelessandbold.com and sign up for information, inspiration, and exclusive opportunities for us, women over 55. Thanks for listening. And remember, no matter what you do, keep living ageless and bold.